Today on the Tech Bytes podcast, we get a preview of HPE Discover. HPE is our sponsor, and we're going to talk about significant networking, security, and agentic AI announcements coming out of the event. We'll also talk about how HPE is converging network and security in its product portfolio, cloud-delivered network management, and HPE's approach to AI, both as a tool being used within HPE and to deliver new services and capabilities to customers. Our guests are John Green, CTO and Chief Security Officer for the Aruba Networking Division of HPE, and Larry Lunetta, VP AI, Security and Networking Product Marketing. So John and Larry, welcome to the podcast. And Larry, what can network and wireless engineers expect to hear at HPE Discover about new products, new capabilities, that kind of thing?
As you know, HPE Discover is our marquee customer and partner event that we hold each year in Las Vegas during the month of June. There's about 12,000 people that come and experience the entire HPE portfolio, but networking is one of the three core focus points for Discover. And that reflects HPE's strategic priorities that include not just networking, but hybrid cloud and AI. And attendees will see a dedicated networking demo showcase covering the entire portfolio, and they'll attend over 140 technical networking sessions. And our engineering team's innovation has been in overdrive over the last 6 months or so. And while we'll definitely have some exciting AI news that we'll talk about at the show, we've also made 3 major announcements over the last 2 months covering every part of the portfolio. We call that the road to Discover.
Okay.
So in early April, we introduced on-premise and VPC deployment models for Aruba Central, which is our cloud-native network management platform. And we also introduced some bespoke AI agents that kind of are the forerunners of the agentic AI announcement that we'll be making at the show that John will go into in more detail. At RSA at the end of April, we introduced the migration of ClearPass NAC capability to Central. We now have cloud native NAC, and I think everyone's familiar with ClearPass and the access control solution that represents. And that's in support of a universal ZTNA solution. That's part of the security and networking coming together. And then at the end of May, we introduced broad-based additions to our core portfolio, including 7 new Wi-Fi 7 access points, and updates to our campus and data center switching portfolio. And that also includes new DPU-based smart switches. And then finally, as I mentioned, during the show, we're unveiling a complete agentic AI ops solution that builds on our leadership in applying AI to manage today's complex networks. So overall, super excited, lots going on. Everyone who attends is going to see all these innovations, and it's probably our most impactful Discover ever.
Yeah, you said, I think 140 networking related sessions. That's pretty good. And maybe folks who weren't thinking of HPE, you said networking is now like one of the core pillars of the show.
Exactly. The showcase is diced up into 3 areas, as I mentioned, and there's over 25 exhibits, including how we manage the entire show's NOC, which will be on the showcase floor. So it's going to be fun for networking professionals.
Yeah, I'd love to stop by the NOC and see everything that's going on there. So, networking and security, they're often like kind of separate silos in organizations. Is HPE seeing that changing? And if so, what does it mean for how HPE is integrating security and networking in its portfolio?
I think the answer is that they have to be more integrated these days. The stakes have become too high in both cybersecurity world, but also in networking in terms of the dependence that our customers have on their networking environments. People, in 20 years ago, you could get things like maintenance windows for your network, and today those are really difficult to get. People expect these things to be up 24 hours a day. And so security and networking have been coming more and more together. And just to illustrate the example, we've seen customer situations where hey, the Wi-Fi is down, and people immediately, the networking team goes and tries to figure out, well, what failed on that? Was it a firmware problem? Was it a config problem, et cetera? Only to find out that the security team had changed some internal firewall rule, and not told anybody, and suddenly the access points can't reach their controller anymore, and that was the ultimate problem. And it was because the security teams and the networking teams were operating from a different operating picture. They didn't have that same type of network management view, et cetera. So that's a real easy example of a place where those things have to come more together. The other thing that I would say in there is we've seen if you've been in networking as long as I have, you remember when we had kind of discrete boxes called routers back in the day, and there were lots of them. They were all over the place. And gradually those devices kind of disappeared. Now, not everywhere, but in sort of the corporate interior network, they became subsumed into the switch. And initially we called it a layer 3 switch. I don't think we really say that anymore, but we kind of see the same thing happening with the interior firewall, the departmental firewall or the zone firewall. Of why should that be a separate box managed by a separate team? Why don't we just integrate the firewall functionality into those switching and routing devices and make that an innate part of the network? And that really gets to the idea of zero trust and where those things need to go, of saying, I've got to control access down to the individual port level or the individual Wi-Fi connection level. Bringing security and networking together really helps you do that.
There used to be an architectural answer to that question, John. Why don't we do that? But now it's just a different world now. It really is. AI question though. There is so much hype around AI. Larry, you mentioned there's going to be some AI discussion like that. That's going to be one of the important discussions at Discover. Okay, a lot of business leaders, I look at them and they're all wound up about this. Should I go this direction? Everybody else seems to be doing it, so should I be doing it? Okay, how are you guys as HPE guiding your customers about this? How do you guide them so that do they need to adopt AI? And if they do so, how do they do it correctly?
Yeah, I'm a fan of the Gartner hype cycle that they talk about, and we're clearly at sort of the peak of inflated expectations when it comes to AI right now. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, because there's a plateau of enlightenment coming down the road where we sort of realize what AI is really good for. Look, what I see today, and we saw this in the security industry maybe 5 years ago, and it's kind of caught up to the rest of everything today, is vendors that say, well, today I have this feature that now it's AI powered, and it's the same feature that they had a year before, but now it's AI powered. And so as a consumer of that, you really need to ask the question, what problem is the AI solving? What is it enabling me to do that I couldn't do without having AI? And to sort of sort through the vendor speak on these sorts of things, because everybody's hyped up over this, and it is an exciting technology. We're big believers in it. We're just not believers in saying AI for the sake of AI. We're trying to solve real customer problems with that. And so an example of that, a big example of that, is in the area of AI ops that we use to support network operations. AI is really good at picking up small signals out of big noisy messes, and humans are not good at that. And that's an area where we've deployed AI very effectively to pull out insights. And an example of that, I've got 6 different Wi-Fi customers. They all have similar looking networks in terms of, from an AI perspective, we don't know, that they're all hospitals or that they're all retail stores, that sort of thing. But from a feature perspective that the AI can pick up on, they all look to be the same. And some of those have higher performance and higher, however you want to define performance, looks better. And they have slightly different configs. The AI is good at saying, hey, your config looks slightly different from the best performer in this category. We think if you change this one setting, you could increase performance as well. And by the way, it's safe to do that because we've also analyzed your user base, and we know that you don't have sort of problematic client devices that are in this environment that would conflict with that particular config setting. That's something that AI is really good at picking through. And so we can answer this question kind of all day long of what's the business benefit to the AI. The generative AI that's sort of just come on the scene, it feels like yesterday. It was more than 2 years ago at this point. That's a whole other use case where, and the easiest way to look at that is a natural language interface to a very large data set, and being able to allow people and our customers, for example, to ask more open-ended queries, the data's been there for a long time, right? We've always had the data, and we've been building up the data lakes for that. But customers are not data scientists, and they don't know the query language to sort of build arbitrary queries into that data, where something like an LLM lets them describe in natural language that they all do speak. Hey, this is what I want to get, and let the AI figure out what the programming and the query language needs to look like. So that's another really good use case for AI as well. So I would say, yeah, there's a lot of hype around this. I don't think people need to panic. I think they need to ask their vendors and say, tell me what you're doing with AI to make my life better, and it'll be a good conversation.
But it seems like you've kind of elucidated on two kind of, you've made it, I think, an important distinction between sort of approaches to AI. One, like right now, everything seems to be wrapped up around LLMs, but you're also talking about having a data lake, having a lot of data that an AI can analyze and find things that maybe people weren't necessarily looking for, and then surface up those recommendations. And on the other hand, you've got sort of the LLM model where I can talk to a data set essentially using natural language.
Yeah, and one of those is more classically called machine learning. It's a it's a
Yeah.
subfield of AI, but it's sort of saying we don't exactly know what the question is that we ought to ask. Let's let the data tell us what questions we ought to be asking, and that's what machine learning is really good at. So we end up with an algorithm that, well, it's not really an algorithm, but it is of how do I determine whether performance will be good or bad? And the machine learning has been trained on all this massive data, and that's kind of a key point. Is if you don't have that data lake, it's really, you can't do the machine learning. You can't do that sort of training. The generative is really just about again, large language models, and being able to converse in natural language, but also to create new things. So you can think about, if I want to extract something of value from that data lake, I need some programming to be able to do that. And LLMs are actually good at writing code, and they can be good at testing code and making sure that those things work.
When I asked you the initial question about AI, John, and you led with AI ops, I was like, "Oh, here we go, agentic AI," and then you didn't say agentic AI at all. So, but that is a big news story right now, agentic AI, and where that is taking us, particularly as it applies to AI ops. Does HPE have a story there?
Yeah, absolutely, and that's going to be a big topic at Discover, is showing that agentic AI capability and combining that with AI apps. Agentic is really about take an LLM, take a Chat GPT, or take your pick of LLM. It's sitting there kind of happily waiting for you to instruct it to do something or to ask it a question, and then it does the thing that you asked for, produces a picture, writes a poem, answers a question of some form. Agentic is more like, take ChatGPT and turn it into a running process and give it sort of standing orders and say, keep doing this thing over and over again, and then give it some ability to actually fulfill externally an action that you want it to take. And so an example of that would be in a network environment. Hey, I've got a building, I've got the dining hall and classroom building one. There's a link between those two buildings, and every day it seems to suffer from fluctuations in performance. Agentic AI, go figure out what's happening. And that agent basically says, okay, I've been instructed to go find the network problem. How would I go about doing that? And it has access to documentation. It has access to best practices and config, and it's got maybe 75 sub agents that are all experts in a particular area, like link stats or routing protocols, or take your pick, and they can communicate to each other. That's really what the agentic is about. And so the being able to say, go do that, come back to me when you have an answer. And if you see these certain sorts of things, you have access to change config, or you have access to take other types of actions. That's really what agentic is all about. It's a little bit more autonomy to go and be doing something, and not sitting around kind of waiting for a human to give instructions.
Is the trust level there for that, John? Are we at that point where we're ready to give some autonomy over to AI agents?
Yeah, that's a good question that we talk about internally quite a bit. I think the answer is yes for some things. I think it's going to take some time. for people to build up that trust. And the first time the AI takes down your network, trust is lost. And so we need to be really careful as a networking vendor on not letting those sorts of things happen. So I think it's going to be a slow. I say slow, but it's going to be relative in terms of building up that trust. Basically, you can look at it from a human in the loop perspective right now and saying, and we've done this, right, with some of the AI ops and AI insights that we'll produce. We'll say, we think that if you did this one thing, it would improve experience by 7%. Do you want to do the thing? Click this button. And if the administrator clicks the button and the response is kind of what we said we thought it would be and nothing goes wrong, that's over time you build up that level of trust. And so I think you're able to basically say, here's the realm of things that I'm willing to allow the AI to do autonomously, and here's the sorts of things that I'm not willing to let it do, and to kind of ring fence what the agents are able to do. They can still make recommendations back to you, but yeah, you're getting from a co-pilot to an autopilot, I guess, is the question. I think it just takes time, and I think it takes experience of being built up, both for us to not do bad things, and also for our customers to kind of see that bad things aren't happening.
I'm actually hopeful that agentic AI will be something we can trust sooner rather than later, and that building our own code to automate something means that we as the humans had to build in all the corner cases and the exceptions and the logic to make sure it doesn't mess up. And that agentic, with the ability to learn from documentation and so on, might have all that logic learned automatically, as long as the documentation is all there. And it would rely less on humans writing code to make sure that the script that's got to run autonomously can do so successfully at all times.
Yeah, I agree with you. I'm putting my security hat on. We've seen a lot of people doing this sort of vibe coding thing with AI, and unfortunately, sometimes it produces things that are riddled with security vulnerabilities because it's copying, bad code that's been seen out there before. But I keep having to remind myself, this is the worst that it's ever going to be. It's only going to get better from here.
So one last question before we wrap up. Obviously, Aruba networking is a big part of HPE. Anything around Wi-Fi 7 or even AI related to wireless that we should be looking for at the show?
Yes, and in fact, we were just talking about what we would call AI for networking. That was a point that John made. If you turn it around and you say networking for AI, the network has a critical role in terms of capturing, securing, and transporting data, especially for training and for inferencing. And we've continued to tune our infrastructure to support that. Our switches, especially our higher end DPU enhanced switches, provide built-in networking services that you don't have to offload to the servers now. At the edge, our Wi-Fi 7 access points have been designed to capture not just user-oriented data, but IoT-oriented data, lots of different connection capabilities. We can run containers on the access points, which means that we can do some pre-processing of data before we send it on to the AI models. So, we play both sides. We play, how do we make networks easier to manage via AI for networking? And then the flip side is we enhance the ability for organizations to build and stand up AI models through networking for AI.
Yeah, I'd add to just say that from a Wi-Fi 7 perspective, we continue to build out that portfolio, both indoor, outdoor, and semi-indoor, outdoor. And think of a stadium that we're doing a lot of large public venues where the roof of that stadium opens up. Is that an indoor and outdoor environment? And that becomes really important when you start getting into things like 6 gigahertz. And we've done a lot of work worldwide trying to open up that 6 gigahertz band for unlicensed use, because there's so much spectrum that people are exhausting, the 2.4 and the 5 gigahertz. So we're moving into 6 gigahertz as well, and that's a big deal for Wi-Fi 7. The other thing I'd add is those access points, memory constrained and CPU constrained type devices. What kind of AI models can we run on those? And we're starting to look at some of that as well to figure out, hey, is there a model that I can run data through at the edge, so I don't have to send everything all back to the cloud? instead I can do some local processing and kind of send out inferences only. So exciting things happening on that front too.
All right, well, HPE Discover, the first day of it is going to be coming out the same day as this podcast. So if folks want to go find out, news releases or see keynotes or talks, where should they go?
HPE.com. There's a URL for that you'll publish that users can go directly to Discover, the Discover site. Tune in to the keynotes and things like that. One of which is going to be at the Sphere. So there's a lot of excitement around that.
All right, that's HPE.com, and you can also just search HPE Discover to get all of that information. And we will have links in the show notes that accompany this podcast if you want to learn more about HPE, more about the Airheads community from Aruba Networks, and the Discover event. Larry and John, thank you for joining us, and thanks to HPE for being a sponsor. Sponsors ensure that the Packet Pushers can continue to offer high-quality, deeply technical content for your professional development for free. That includes a dozen technical podcasts on networking, security, IPv6, DevOps, and more, plus an industry blog, 2 weekly newsletters, a community Slack group, a YouTube channel, and an IRC group. Find everything at packetpushers.net. It's all free with no login required. You can also hear us on Spotify, thought lead with us on LinkedIn, and rate us on Apple Podcasts. Last but not least, remember that too much networking would never be enough.